Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 8, and we are going to be looking at quarterback prospects going into this. Quarterback's kind of a interesting position. The Steelers addressed it with Dwayne Haskins a little bit, and I mean, you're hoping for a turnaround with Haskins because he did have first-round talent at one point. He was considered a first-rounder, so you have him, and you have Mason Rudolph, and then you have your starter in Ben Roethlisberger. Kind of in a weird position this year because you do kind of need a quarterback. It doesn't have to be this year, but likely next year you do unless you turn Haskins around again, but that's not very likely. But the Steelers are not in a good spot to get a quarterback. So originally thought that they might be able to get Mac Jones, but based on what it sounds like going in, it's just not going to be possible to get a good top-tier quarterback in this draft. And that's even if you consider Mac Jones a top-tier quarterback. I did not look at him today, but basically the Steelers' options would be Kyle Trask, David Mills, or someone in between, and it just doesn't seem like a good option for me. Getting into some Steelers news just to kind of add to this, Steelers signed back Josh Dobbs to compete with Haskins for that third quarterback spot. So you even have like 4 quarterbacks on your roster right now. It just doesn't, to me, make sense to just get a mid-round guy to get a mid-round guy. Mason Rudolph's your backup, whether you like it or not. And then you have Haskins to compete and maybe try and turn his career around. I don't really think you need to add a quarterback, so I only took 3 prospects today with that in mind because I really don't think quarterback's going to be addressed. I'm pretty sure John's going to take 4 when he gets them, but I just don't I don't see it as very important right now anymore, especially with bringing back Josh Dobbs. But before we get into my prospects, I do want to go back to some Steelers news. The first thing is Vince Williams is back. Kind of a shocking turn of events. Don't really know if it was expected. But yeah, Vince Williams is back on a 1-year deal, and he's going to reevaluate at the end of the season whether he wants to continue to play or he wants to go into coaching. He's talked about going into coaching. So, I mean, I think that'd be cool. I don't know if he'd stay with the Steelers if he went into that. And what's even better is that he had interest from other teams. There was like a narrative going around that people don't want to be Steelers, and after Tyson Alualu, Vince Williams, and Juju Smith-Schuster all turned down other deals to go to other teams, I mean, that narrative's got to be dead, right? It has to be, I feel like. And I mean, I think Vince Williams is a great bringback. I think he provides veteran leadership. He's a quality starter. He's a mentor. I'm very happy with that. The Steelers also signed former Bears defensive end Abdullah Anderson. I don't really have much thought about that. I don't really know much about him. But we double-dipped into Bears for the free agency because we obviously got Coward earlier, the offensive lineman. Last bit of Steelers news is James Conner has signed a 1-year, $1.75 million contract with Pittsburgh West, the Arizona Cardinals. It is a fully guaranteed contract. It seems like he was only waiting for his surgery to be fully cleared because he got surgery in the offseason that didn't allow him to work out. But he passed his physical. He's good now. And he has decided to sign with the Arizona Cardinals, which I think is a great spot for him. I wish him nothing but the best. I mean, the kid had Pittsburgh all throughout his veins, and it's unfortunate how his time ended up. With the Steelers just wanted to move on and restart the run game, because obviously you see a 1-year, $1.75 million contract. The Steelers are just egging on that they want to change everything about their run game going into this year, because that is not a big contract, and Connor flashed at times. I think Cardinals got a really good deal. If he could stay healthy, I think he's solid. I mean, pairing him with Chase Edmonds is a really good pair. I think that as long as he stays healthy, the Cardinals got a good one, and I wish him the best. And Steelers fans should wish him nothing but the best, because he's done nothing but been great for the organization in the city of Pittsburgh, and an inspiration since he got there in college. I mean, basically, if you followed him through high school, maybe too, but basically since he got to college. Anyhow, let me get into my prospects. I'm going to start with an odd one. And I'm going to explain it first. I think it's important every year, even if the Steelers are not in on a quarterback because they're going too high, to look at a very high-rated quarterback and to evaluate for yourself. I've done Tua, I've done Lamar Jackson, which Lamar Jackson was reasonable actually at the time because he went at 31. But I mean like first round quarterbacks in general because it's a good evaluation practice. I looked at Kyler, Tua, Lamar Jackson, and I will be now looking at Zach Wilson. I think it's a good practice to be able to look at a top quarterback, evaluate them, see what I think of them, because next year we could be doing the same exact thing, but for real. We might be looking at top tier quarterbacks. I think I'm going to be happy that I've now looked at Kyler, Tua, Lamar, and now Zach Wilson and made my decisions on them, and then I could see how I viewed them and see how they turned out, which I was pretty favorite. My favorite was Kyler Murray. I was a big fan of Murray, and I think that of the bunch, he's probably the best before Zach Wilson, I should say, of the ones I looked at. Lamar Jackson obviously should be probably the front runner for most people because he won an MVP. But I still just don't. The same problems I talked about Lamar Jackson coming out are still active in the NFL. He's just not a very good passer, not very accurate, but he is better than Vic, and that's exactly what I said. I said that his rushing is going to be better than Vic, so I was pretty correct there. Two, I was probably a little bit off on so far. I mean, he needed to develop, I think, a little bit more, and Miami kind of messed with his development a little bit, but regardless, I'm kind of getting off topic. We got Zach Wilson here. I got a lot of Jets fans, a lot of people excited about him and talking to me about him, and I wanted to be able to keep up with that conversation as well. So Wilson was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school in Utah and had just come off a loss in the semifinals of the state championship, but still he had schools impressed after being runner-up for Utah's Mr. Football Award and had offers from Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon State, California, Syracuse, Boise State, and BYU. It came down to Boise State and BYU for him, and obviously he chose BYU. As a true freshman, he started 7 of 9 games, becoming BYU's youngest starting quarterback ever after starting in the Hawaii game. He threw for 1,578 yards on 120 completions with a 65.9 completion percentage, 12 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and added 75 rushes for 211 yards and 2 more rushing touchdowns, all while being injured as he got shoulder surgery on his throwing arm after the season. His next year wasn't quite as good and he couldn't finish the year after breaking his thumb on his throwing hand and needing surgery. Still, though, through 9 games, he was able to complete 199 passes for 2,382 yards, a 62.4 completion percentage, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and 67 carries for 167 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. In 2020 is where he really improved his draft stock, though. He completed 247 of 336 passes, for the second highest completion percentage in the FBS was 73.5%, for 3,692 yards, 33 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, and added 70 rushes for 254 yards, and another 10 touchdowns in 12 starts. This was all without his favorite target up until 2020 in Matt Bushman. Obviously, if you listen to the tight end episode and you haven't, I suggest you go back and listen to what I said about Bushman. But he tore his ACL to start in the offseason leading up to the 2020 season, so he wasn't able to play, and Wilson still had a career year. Following an amazing junior season for Wilson, he decided to forego his senior season and to declare for the draft. So what's good about Wilson is he has a cannon. He can throw it deep, and he can throw it far, and he can make basically every throw that's required to go deep. I'm pretty sure he could make a completion 50 yards down the field if he was asked to. I mean, he was asked to a few times on his college tape, but I think that he might have one of the biggest arms in this draft. I was very impressed with it. It looked pretty flawless for his motion, too, as well. Then, with the strength, he can make cross-body throws while moving in the opposite direction. I found that to be a very impressive part of Zach Wilson. It wasn't something that came up like once or twice on tape. It was something that he continued to show that he can throw across his body. Just has excellent strength to get it there. It's just it's one of the toughest throws you could make across body on the opposite side of the field. And I was impressed with his ability to do that. Then he went through his progressions in 2020. I thought that it was something I was going to be worried about, but he reads the field. He's not a guy to just stare down the first guy he sees. Then he was willing to take the dump off, though. I don't like a guy that's going to constantly try and force it downfield just to force it downfield. And Wilson wasn't a guy that's just going to do that. He was pretty smart about it, at least I thought. But he also did know how to drive it downfield as well. I mean, that was mostly what he did, but He knew when to throw the ball where, I felt like. Uh, his deep accuracy and touch is impressive. I felt like he was getting balls right where they needed to go, and in tight windows, even deep down the field, he was getting it there. Again, partially because of his strong arm and arm strength, but I was just impressed, and I like the touch he put on the ball. He put it in a lot of spots where only his guy can get it, so I like that about him. The stats weren't crazy, but I think it's because of the sacks taking away. It's so weird, college football taking rushing yards away from sacks, but I thought he had really solid rushing abilities. I thought he was a pretty mobile quarterback. I thought that I liked what I saw, his ability to get out of the pocket and so on and so forth. I just liked his mobility kind of as a whole, but his rushing was pretty good. And like I said, pretty good in the pocket. He buys extra time in the pocket. He steps around. He moves around pretty good there. Then, in what is considered Wilson's worst 2020 game, it was plagued by drops and one of his receivers running 20 yards backwards on one of his passes, making his stats look worse than he actually played. He wasn't really even bad. Even the interception was on a Hail Mary to end the first half. So I thought, because I asked my friend who is a big Zach Wilson fan now because he's a Jets fan and he's watched a lot of tape. I was like, what do you think was his worst game? And he told me this one, and I watched it. I was like, that wasn't even that bad. Like, honestly, I thought that a lot of it was on his team around him, and his stats seemed bad, but they really weren't all on him. But he plays aggressive, but that's because he trusts his guys to make plays and can make those tight window throws. I already touched on the tight window throws, but he has a lot of trust in his guys. He gives his guys a lot of 50-50 balls that they can attack, and then usually they won. He had a good reason to trust his guys. I mean, he was big fan of Dax Milne, who was his roommate. I mean, he was a pretty good option. And Isaac Rex, I kind of forget the tight end's name. After Matt Bushman went down, Isaac Rex was an absolute monster in the red zone. He led BYU in touchdowns though. But yeah, so he trusts his guys. Then he watches tape like a fiend and has a strong desire to keep getting better. I mean, I read a story where he literally got to spend time with his dad, and what they did all weekend was just watch tape. He's a tape junkie. He really enjoys what he's doing. He wants to get better, so there's a strong desire to get better for Zach Wilson. You definitely can't question his commitment to football. Then he's accurate on shovel passes and pitches. I didn't see a fumble on tape. I thought that he was pretty good, and he gave his guys catchable balls on those kind of throws, I guess you would call them. I mean, they're kind of just handoffs, but they're throws. Then I was happy with his release time. I thought that it was an adequate throwing motion. I thought it didn't take too long. Not the quickest, but I'd call it solid. Going into his negatives, his 2019 tape wasn't good. It was really, really putrid. I knew that. I don't know if I said that in the tight end episode, but I might have said it. I might have said it live, but watching Matt Bushman tape from 2019, I was like, how did Wilson raise his stock this much to be a potential top 2 pick? And it was because it was bad. I went back and watched the game, and I'm like, yeah, this is bad. You really have to hope 2020 wasn't a fluke when you're taking Wilson. You have to hope that one good year isn't to find all for him. I mean, you do have to hope that 2020 is what he is going to be, and he's going to get better from there. It's just scary. I think that's scary with one good year of production and one good year of accuracy. At least stats-wise. He still has the occasional miss in the short and intermediate ranges, and that's why I say stat-wise accuracy, because he was second in the FBS in completion percentage. But even watching his tape, I felt like he had more throws that were inaccurate than I would have hoped for a guy that had those kind of stats. I am not sold on it. I'm more sold on his guys making good plays to help him look good, because his accuracy is not amazing. I was expecting amazing accuracy in 2020, and there's still some problems. Not deep, again. It was really just short and intermediate, but those are the ones I kind of want you to make more, because deep is harder, but the short and intermediate is what you're going to be targeting, I feel like, most of the time in the NFL, unless you're really, really good, but regardless. Another thing is that he holds onto the ball too long. He plays a lot of hero ball. He tries to move around a little bit too much, holds on, and it resulted in some bad sacks backwards, and I think even a few fumbles. Then he needs to slide rather than eat contact. And what bothered me the most is because I know, after reading about him, I know that he's had 2 surgeries on his right arm. One on his thumb, I mean, I guess you don't consider that the arm, it's the hand, but it's on the same side, and then one on his shoulder. Watching him lead into contact and absorb contact with his right shoulder and right arm in general was a no-no. He needs to slide because he's going to, if he gets hurt on that arm again, and it's his throwing arm, that's what concerns me. Honestly, if he did it with his left more, I wouldn't have been concerned, but he puts his shoulder down to his right, and that scares me. I mean, that's asking for another injury, and then who knows how many injuries you could take to your throwing arm until it actually affects you. I didn't like that. I think he needs to slide more and not. And if he's going to eat contact, try to avoid contact on that side, especially because that's usually the hand he's got. That's usually the arm he's carrying the ball in. So even if you're not worried about the injury, it's just asking to fumble. Anyway, a lot of the trickery BYU used will not be anywhere close as effective at the NFL level, and they use it a lot more than I was expecting. I'm talking about just a bunch of like the shovel pass and more often. Why can't I think of it? When the running back turns around and throws the ball back to the quarterback. I don't know why I can't think of the name of it right now. But they ran that a lot. It worked a lot for BYU, but it's not going to trick NFL level defensive backs as often as it did at BYU. Stuff like that. And a lot of the trickery, they use more trickery than that, but he got a good amount of yards off of those, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Then his aggressiveness can be a double-edged sword, and there's still some throws he makes into coverage that are kind of head-scratching. It happened a couple times during Houston. The Houston game was what I think was his worst game. I believe my friend said my friend said Coastal Carolina was his worst game. I thought Houston was his worst game by far. I really didn't think he did a good job in that game. He really struggled, and I felt like took some steps back. But, yeah. Going on from there, he had awful clock management at the half of the Boise State game, and I just wanted to point that out. I don't really know what happened. It could be a coach issue and not his. But it's not something that's going to come up very often, but I did want to point it out because it was really, really bad clock management. I don't know what went on. Really just overall bad clock management by BYU in that. But overall, the difference between Wilson being okay at the next level and being great at the next level is going to be that short accuracy and intermediate accuracy with emphasis on short. If you're only going to take less than 5 yards on a play, he needs to make sure to get them. He needs to make sure that he is throwing it accurately, giving his guy a chance. I really didn't think it was going to be a continued problem for him going from 2019 to 2020 with how much the accuracy improved stats-wise, but as I watched more and more 2020 tape, it just continued to pop up. It's a nagging problem for him, and even though the stats say he was very accurate, it's just not the case in certain areas. He also still makes some poor decisions, but not that much. I think his aggressiveness should be considered a positive at the NFL level because it's likely just the right amount where it'll bite him at times, but overall with his cannon of an arm and ability to fit into tight windows, it should be a good thing for him overall. Wilson was also built for an offense that uses and has really good tight end, with Bushman being the leading receiver for the team in 2018 and 2019, and then Isaac Rex, again, was a monster in 2020, leading the team in receiving touchdowns with 12. Thus, I think Matt LaFleur's offense with the Jets will be perfect for him. However, I really think they need to address the tight end position to help him, and could even address it twice, as I'm not a big fan of Chris Herndon, and I'm a big Chris Herndon hater if I'm being real, and Ryan Griffin does nothing for me. It would likely be smart for the Jets to grab Bushman in the later rounds, who Wilson already has a rapport with. So, Stronger Than Steel podcast or Jets podcast, who knows? Can't tell the difference. But I did evaluate him kind of knowing he'd be a Jet just to have a good understanding of what a top quarterback looks like. So to get my opinion on him, I looked at his highlights. I watched him versus UCF in 2020, versus Coastal Carolina in 2020, versus Houston in 2020, versus Boise State in 2020, and then I watched versus Tennessee in 2019. My next prospect is someone who's a bit more realistic for the Steelers, if the Steelers did want to address the quarterback position, or at least have a chance at him, is Ian Book from Notre Dame. It's 6 foot and 211 pounds. Oh, I don't know if I told you how tall Zach Wilson is. Zach Wilson 6'2" and 214 pounds. But yeah, Ian Book, Notre Dame, 6 foot, 211 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school in California, but considered a very smart one, with offers from both Harvard and Yale. He also had offers from Nevada, Boise State, San Diego State, and Idaho before originally committing to Washington State. In a turn of events late in the process, Notre Dame put in an offer, and he decommitted from Washington State and chose Notre Dame instead. As you pretty much expect, he got to be in Power 5. As a redshirt freshman, he made himself a legend in Notre Dame's lore, notably entering the Citrus Bowl game against LSU and leading the Fighting Irish to a victory. He started one of 10 games that year and was 46 of 75 for a 61.3 completion percentage, 456 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, also had 37 carries for 207 yards. In 2018, he wasn't the starter immediately. However, after the 4th game, he became the starter over Winbush, leading to 9 starts through 12 games, where he had 214 completions for 2,628 yards, a 68.2 completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and again, adding on the ground, 95 carries for 280 yards and 4 more touchdowns. In 2019, he was a full-time starter through 13 games and was named Notre Dame's Offensive Player of the Year for his 240 completions for 3,039 yards, a 60.2 completion percentage, 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, while adding 110 carries for 567 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. In 2020, Book was named a third-team All-ACC player while becoming the school's most winningest quarterback after only losing 5 games and winning 30 in his time there. Through 12 starts, he was able to complete 228 passes for 2,829 yards, a completion percentage of 64.6, 15 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and added 116 carries for 485 yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground. After his senior season, he declared for the draft. So what was good about him is he had solid mobility. I mean, I think he had the most rushing yards of any of the quarterbacks I looked at today. I think that overall he showed solid rushing ability. I liked it. And then he trusts his guys and gives them chances on 50-50 balls. A pretty good touch on the ball. I felt like he was giving his guys constant chances to win in those battles. And put it up there a few times. And I mean, usually Notre Dame had good players, like they had Chase Claypool and stuff, to be able to come down with it most of the time. Then he has adequate throw power, not a cannon, but decent enough where he can make 30-yard throws. That was a negative that people were kind of telling me coming in, that he doesn't have a very good arm. I was a little bit surprised. I thought that his arm was better than I was expecting, so I'm saying he has adequate throw power. He is not afraid to test guys. He targeted Asante Samuel Jr. a couple times in his game against FSU. He is not a guy to have a side of the field shut down. He is going to go even at your best players. It doesn't matter. He trusts his guys that much. He targets the entire field. He doesn't really avoid anywhere. I think it was good watching him get to all the levels, throwing in the middle of the field, throwing intermediate middle of the field, stuff like that. It might not have been as much in the intermediate middle of the field, but I saw him target there a few times. I mean, I kind of say that because when I think of Mason Rudolph, which is obviously the team's number 2, he really struggles to target intermediate, middle, and deep in the field. He avoids it as much as he can. There's a game where he was starting. It might have been Devlin Hodges, actually. But, I mean, they still have the same problem. But it was a game that he started where he only had one throw to the intermediate or deep middle the entire game because he just avoids it. But back to Ian Book. He has a good ability to extend plays. Again, I talked about his mobility. He's pretty good at stepping up, getting around, and kind of moving around in the pocket. I think he was better at sensing pressure than people give him credit for. I thought that he was actually probably better against pressure than Zach Wilson, if I'm being honest with you. He had a good feel for it. Then he's tough. He took some big hits and kept trucking in certain games. I thought that's good for him. I mean, he wasn't afraid of getting hit. Then he was voted team captain twice in 2019 and 2020, while being described as a leader by coaches and players alike. So he's a guy that people describe as a locker room guy. I think that's always good. I think personality is a big factor for quarterbacks. I mean, you look at what happened with Carson Wentz. People in the locker room supposedly didn't like him, and it kind of ostracized him. So having a leader in the locker room might be an underrated quality for a quarterback. So what's not good about him is that he was surrounded by a super team in 2020, which was his best season. I mean, that team was really good throughout, and he had guys everywhere, so that's something to consider when you look at this. And I mean, even on the offensive line, he has Liam Eichenberg, and he's coming out. Then he's a dangerous pass machine. I understand trusting your guys, but Book takes it to the extreme. And while it worked with this 2020 Notre Dame super team, more often than not, he needs to get through his progressions faster and choose more open guys if he wants to make it in the NFL. Just really, really kind of throwing it up and hoping almost every play. He wasn't finding the open guy. He was just kind of throwing and letting his guys make plays, which is respectable if it's working, but it's not going to work like that in the NFL level. I promise. You got to make your reads, make them fast, and find a guy that's more open more often than Book did. Then another thing is that he's not good throwing under pressure. That second game against Clemson was a mess. He really struggles any sort of pressure, and that ball is going to be inaccurate as anything. It's not going anywhere close, and he can't throw under pressure. I thought that he had his worst performances when he was under pressure, and again, in that Clemson game, that second one, not in the regular season, that was tough. Then when his ground game is taken away by good defenses, like his own rushing abilities, he's a complete non-factor. I mean, most of the reason why Book was successful at Notre Dame was because of his mobility, which is almost weird to say because it's kind of unexpected, but teams had to respect him running out of the pocket. They had quarterback spies on him, I believe, in the second Clemson game, which is what kept him really from getting any rushing yards, but he's a non-factor. As a thrower, it's almost when I make jokes about Lamar Jackson, like if you can stop Lamar Jackson from running and force him to pass, you're good. That's like the same with Ian Book, except Ian Book is not the rusher Lamar Jackson is. Teams at the NFL level are going to be able to stop Ian Book without game planning for it. I can promise you. I think. Then, he needs to create. Just building on what I just said. He needed to create space for throws by keeping defenses honest, and he had quite a few overthrows on tape. I mean, he wasn't a very accurate passer as a whole, so I thought just overall not the greatest. So I've watched a lot of Ian Book tape while doing Prospect. It feels sad that it's over now. It's been like a meme, and John was really excited for me to do Ian Book because, I mean, it's been a while. I mean, Ian Book was one of the first prospects I said, wow, this guy sucks. And wow, the Notre Dame quarterback sucked because I remember watching Winbush even when he was a starter. But unfortunately, similar to my first analysis of him, he still sucks. It's not very good. Less in 2020 compared to when I first saw him in 2018, but still not very good. I don't want to rip him too hard. I think his mobility was pretty good and the toughness he displayed was nice, but mobility and toughness aren't going to get you far in the NFL as a quarterback. Thus, I think Book will go undrafted and become a priority free agent. Some people think that he will go in the 7th, which isn't out of this world. Some team could just take the flyer on him in the 7th, but I think it's more likely he goes undrafted, in my personal opinion. So, to get my opinion on him, I looked at his highlights. I watched versus Clemson in 2020 in the regular season. I watched versus Florida State in 2020. Then I watched versus Alabama in 2021 in the Rose Bowl. And then I watched versus Clemson in the ACC Championship. I also watched tons of tape of previous seasons, watching other players like Alize Mack and stuff like that. So I've been on Book for a while. My next prospect and last prospect is Felipe Franks. He's from Arkansas. He's 6'5" and 234 pounds. He was regarded as the 5th best quarterback coming out of high school in 2016 and was the 65th overall prospect. He was a dual sport athlete, having also played baseball, and was drafted by the Boston Red Sox on the 31st round of the 2019 draft. He got offers from a lot of big schools to play football, such as Alabama, LSU, and Clemson, but Franks chose Florida to start his college career. Franks got to start 8 of 11 games as a redshirt freshman, completing 125 passes for 1,438 yards, a 54.6 completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. In 2018, he started 13 games and completed 188 passes for 2,457 yards, a 58.4 completion percentage, 24 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 110 carries for 350 yards and 7 more touchdowns. In his third game of 2019, Franks dislocated and fractured his ankle, allowing Kyle Trask to come in and take the starting role permanently. Knowing this, Franks transferred to Arkansas for 2020 and had some of the best numbers of his career through 9 starts after having 163 completions for 2,107 yards, a 68.5 completion percentage, 17 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and had a rushing touchdown as well. So what's good about him is that he's an athlete who had the 37th highest relative athletic score of 817 quarterback prospects from 1987, with an extremely rare 20-yard split time for a quarterback. Then he has NFL size. I mean, so basically he's an athletic freak. 6'5", 234 pounds, and he had a lot of athletic abilities. He's got that NFL size. I mean, that's a big dude, and that would be good for the NFL. He's a tough guy to take down because of it, because of the size, both in the pocket and when in the open field. He gave me some Big Ben vibes at times. I mean, he was pretty good at shaking off some tacklers, and I mean, he was tough to bring down as a whole. Even when he was rushing, I thought that he was good there. Then he's good at shifting around in the pocket to create extra time. I felt like all my quarterbacks were kind of good at that. They were good around moving around and just avoiding the pressure, so he was good at that as well. Then he has solid pocket presence to know when to step up and avoid pressure as a whole. He's probably the best at that. I think I gave that to Ian Book. I might have said that by accident, but I think Felipe Franks overall was actually the best, and Zach Wilson was the worst, funny enough. But anyhow, the offense didn't help him. There's plenty of drops from receivers on tape, and there wasn't a quote-unquote guy to make spectacular catches. Also felt like he was under pressure on about 50% of his throws, so he could really thrive if given a better O-line. I was surprised by his ability to go through progressions as a whole. He's not a guy to just stare down his first read all the time. He does scan the field, and that's not something I was prepared for. I was told he was really raw and that he does stare down guys, but I think they meant he stares down guys when he's making his decision, I guess, but he doesn't stay on his first read. I didn't put that as an I didn't put that. I don't know. I was kind of confused by why other people were saying that. But going to the negative side, he makes poor decisions and bad throws when under pressure. Really, really bad. I wasn't not as bad as Ian Book, but still pretty bad under pressure. Then he relied heavily on screens, swing passes, and dump offs to the flats for a lot of his yards. I know I said that Arkansas didn't really have a guy. If they had a guy, it'd probably be their running back and guys like that, because he relied on this running back to make yards for him in the passing game a lot. And then he almost never targets the intermediate and deep middle of the field. I thought that was a big deal to me, again, because it reminds me of Mason Rudolph, and I don't think Mason Rudolph is very good. His throw power was inconsistent. I felt like he didn't have proper ball velocity when throwing at times when I knew he had the arm power to do so. I feel like he's kind of out of control with the power he puts on the ball. So that was kind of interesting to see. I don't think that's like a negative I've ever said about a quarterback, that the arm power is inconsistent, but it was something I noticed with him. Accuracy is also inconsistent, and even more worrisome, accuracy on wide open throws wasn't very good. He's got to calm down. Needs to settle down. That's what it is. I feel like whenever a quarterback misses a wide open throw, when I've seen them make harder throws, it's they get so excited that they literally just get rid of their accuracy. They throw it a little bit too hard, a little too fast, because they're like, wow, I need to take advantage of that. He needs to settle down and make those easy throws. On anything other than short passes and quick dump-offs, he often held onto the ball for too long. I felt like he needs better anticipation on his throws. He needs to get the ball out quicker, because he held on to it. He had to wait for the play to develop, or the route to develop, for him to throw the ball. Not a natural anticipatory throw guy. He also needs to lead his receivers better so they don't have to slow down to make the catch. Way too often on tape did I see him not get the ball to the right spot with a good touch so that his receiver could keep running. So that was also something worrisome about him. Franks reminded me of current state Cam Newton, with very similar size and performances in the 40-yard dash, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, and 20-yard shuttle. Then I just felt like the play is similar. Newton's current state isn't very good, but some can be blamed on the lack of talent around him, which is kind of how I feel about Franks. Franks flashed at times and had some throws that I felt like he was incapable of that really wowed me, but it wowed me because he does it so inconsistently. If you're drafting him, you're really drafting him for his potential at his size, so I personally give him a late 6th or early 7th round grade, but his great showing at his pro day could have moved him up for some teams. I just don't think he would be worth more than a 6th or 7th round pick in his current state. So to develop my opinion, I watched his highlights. I watched versus Florida in 2020. I watched versus Ole Miss in 2020. I watched versus Auburn in 2020. And then I watched him versus Miami in 2019 when he was still with Florida because I thought that would be interesting. So ranking my prospects now, number 1 for me is Felipe Franks. I'm not crazy about the Steelers drafting quarterback in the position they're at, and to draft one late seems kind of pointless, but if they do, I would choose Franks. He's an athlete with NFL size that you can hope to develop, and for a 6th rounder, that's not bad. I could take the shot, and in the 7th round, I mean, that's not bad either. I'd honestly prefer in the 7th round, but Felipe Franks got number 1 for me. Then 2nd was Ian Book. I really can't complain much if he's an undrafted free agent, but the problem with Book is that what I look for in a 7th round or undrafted free agent is a quality that is NFL ready that can be developed around. Like a huge arm, really good accuracy on any given level, NFL size, incredible mobility, etc. Essentially, I'm looking for a signature trait that they possess that can be considered NFL ready on its own if you take it away from the player, that, and just as a general thing, that could be considered NFL ready and really good. And Book just doesn't really have that. His mobility is all right, but it's not Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen's. He's got toughness, but that's not a trait to be developed around for me. Again, though, as an undrafted free agent, I really wouldn't complain. And last is Zach Wilson. The amount of draft capital the Steelers would have to give up to make this draft pick is intangible. We are talking about Ricky Williams' amount of draft capital and likely more. I'm sure to get Zach Wilson, we'd have to give up our entire draft this year, and probably, because I think you could only trade draft picks for 4 years. I think probably the next 3 first-round picks at the least to make that pick. I mean, it's a lot. It's intangible. It ranks him last automatically. However, I don't even know how I feel about Wilson going 2 in this draft, if I'm being honest. I don't have time to look at all the top quarterback prospects, but I don't know if Wilson's a top 3 pick for me in most drafts, which is kind of interesting because this is a quarterback-loaded draft. It's expected to be 4 quarterbacks in the top 4 if the Falcons trade out. I mean, there's talks that the Falcons really aren't considering a quarterback, but even if they don't trade out, I think that they could take a quarterback still, but I understand the value of a quarterback, so I think he is still top 10, and if he's the Jets guy, he's a Jets guy. But I'm very curious how Trey Lance and Justin Fields stack up, because I wasn't sold on Wilson. His ceiling is high, but his floor is lower than expected for me. I really was expecting grade A accuracy in 2020, and I didn't get that. Watching his tape, it just wasn't as good as I was hoping. It didn't match the completion percentage stat. I mean, the one good year is so scary for me. It's taking a risk, and I know you kind of have to take that risk with the quarterback. And if you're at number 2, and he's your guy, you do. But I don't know. I really don't know about Zach Wilson. But anyway, you guys have been listening to Season 6 and Episode 8 of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you want to check us out on social media or any other place where you could find us, you could find that in the description below. And everybody, have a good night. Go Steelers.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.